Haman Nature, a journey in search of a peaceful and prosperous society with human nature as a guide. Led by your host, Adam Haman.
Hello, welcome to Haman Nature. I am Adam Haman. With me is my spiky buddy, Tyrone. How you doing, man?
I am so excited, Adam. I can't believe it. I get so pumped every time this year when it comes around. Adam, it's tax day. Woo! I can't wait to pay my fair share.
I am accustomed to people experiencing emotion this time of year, Tyrone, but it's very rarely that emotion.
Don't you feel so patriotic, Adam?
I feel something. Maybe it's patriotism. I thought it was the other thing.
Adam, I sense some doubt in you in what taxes are all about.
Yeah, maybe I just don't get it.
You know what, Adam? Okay. I've got a little bit with the help from our friends at the IRS. I've got a presentation, some presentation materials I'd love to share with you.
Are we going to learn to be good citizens right here on Haman Nature?
Yeah, Adam, I feel like you need a little re-education.
I clearly do.
Maybe your civics, 8th grade civics class didn't do quite a good enough job. So this is coming straight from the IRS, Adam. Understanding taxes.
For those of you who only catch this on audio, Tyrone has pulled up a slideshow created for us, good citizens, by the Internal Revenue Service.
That's right. You can get it right on their website.
And it says in cursive right at the top, understanding taxes.
with a lovely picture of very happy people holding their tax documents ready to pay their taxes, it looks like. And under the picture it says theme your role as a taxpayer.
I want to pause for just a moment on that picture, because in this era where people are complaining for good reason about gaslighting, that picture is the biggest pile of gaslighting I've ever seen. About a dozen so happy people with their tax documents. They can't wait. Some chick brought a briefcase along with her documents. Maybe she's the lawyer. Maybe one of these people is being audited.
Yeah. Maybe. I'm glad to see so many women represented.
That's actually true. It's like 2/3 females paying their taxes.
All right. Well, let's see what great deep knowledge the IRS has provided for our understanding, Adam. Because I feel like you just don't understand.
I clearly don't.
Well, first and foremost, we have to get a quote from, of course, one of the great American heroes. Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., he was a Supreme Court guy, in case you didn't know that. In 1904, he had this wonderful quote: taxes are what we pay for civilized society. Boom, there, QED, mic drop, Adam. Duh.
Actually, I don't think the IRS thought about this particular slide all that carefully, because as much as I dislike Mr. Holmes Jr., he said that in 1904 before the creation of the income tax. So maybe the civilization was more civilized back then, and the taxes we paid weren't quite so onerous.
Yeah, Adam. So that's all you need to know. Taxes
that's all I
are
need to know.
The price for
that's right. I forgot.
Civilized society.
I need to turn off my analytical brain because I'm getting re-educated. I'm sorry, Tyrone.
Yes, Adam, come on. And look at all of the what taxes fund: public goods and services, Adam, social services, financial aid, state and local police, national defense, healthcare for the elderly, Adam, for the elderly. And of course, we wouldn't even be able to read these slides if it wasn't for public education. So, gosh, Adam, don't you know? I mean, are you getting convinced? Are you getting there?
I'm getting propagandized.
Well, Adam, did you know that taxes go way back? There's been all kinds of taxes. Early taxes included cooking oil. They taxed foreigners, and slavery was definitely a form of taxation. I mean, therefore it's okay.
It's bad enough you're a slave, but you get taxed as well.
They even taxed bachelors in England in 1695 and in Missouri in 1820. I really love that they taxed beards, beehives, and boots in
Weird.
Russia.
That's so weird.
And of course, souls.
Is that a typo? It's spelled SOULS. How do you tax souls? What?
Don't question the government, Adam. Just learn.
I'm
Absorb.
trying to be a sponge, Tyrone, for all this government information designed for my benefit.
You know, where does the power to collect taxes come from, Adam? Well, all you need to know is these 3 bullet points. The American Revolution caused debt.
Got it.
Tax was necessary to pay debt.
QED.
Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says Congress has the power to tax. There. Come on. What are you, an anti-constitutionalist, Adam? Get on board.
I find these 3 bullet points fascinating. I mean, they could have just had the third one. Where does the power to collect taxes come from? But why did they bring the American Revolution into it?
If A, then B, then American Revolution. American Revolution, good.
I guess they're kind of saying, maybe we shouldn't have. The problem was A. Maybe we shouldn't have rebelled against the British because then we wouldn't have to pay taxes, right?
Maybe we wouldn't be in debt. Yeah. Wait, there was something about taxation in the Revolution
somewhere
I
in the
know.
list of complaints. Yeah, I don't know.
The federal government dollar, where it comes from. So this one cracks me up, and I love that they put a little asterisk at the bottom. Numbers may not total to 100% due to rounding. No, it's because that 1% that's just missing. I don't know. Maybe there's some secret shadow government programs that money gets funneled to. But here's what I love. Let's take a look at this. 42% from your income tax. Okay, then 24% from Social Security, Medicare, and unemployment and other retirement taxes. So just, so we're clear, they tax you to put the money into Social Security and then tax it when you take it out. How do you tax unemployment? I mean, I know what they mean there, but you got corporate income taxes at a measly 7%. Excise, customs, gifts at 6%, and then borrowing, a whopping 22%. So, my thinking is here: if Doge can cut a bunch of money out of the government, we can just get rid of the personal income taxes and make up for it with a little bit more debt borrowing. So that seems good to me. There, it's good to know. Good to know where the government gets its money. It can do at least a fifth of it just by borrowing.
I know I'm supposed to turn my brain off for these sorts of education camps, but I can't help wondering where they've thrown in the third way, which is counterfeiting. I guess they're shoving that into the borrowing piece of this pie chart.
Yep, just printing the money. Yep, that's all borrowing really is when governments do it. All right, but where does it go, Adam? Where does it go?
Where is transing the mice? I don't see that on this pie chart.
I mean, physical, human, and community development. Adam.
Oh, there it is.
If it wasn't for the government, we'd have no physical, human, and community development. You see, it's the price we pay for civilization, man. Sheesh.
It reminds me of that conversation with Bob Murphy where he was in an argument with a scientist. who admitted that his own taxpayer-funded research was garbage, only read by 5 people ever. But you've got to have the government funding science, because without that, you wouldn't have numbers.
Right? Numbers good.
He thought that. He typed that. He hit send on X. He thinks that without government, we wouldn't have numbers.
And of course, you got to pay interest on the debt.
Of course.
I mean, let's see.
It's interesting that
it's interesting that we fought a revolution that got us into debt, and that's why we need the taxes to pay the debt. And now we need the taxes to service the debt that we still have left over from the revolution, because where else does the debt come from? Oh, no. I get it. We need taxes so the government can just go into more debt. So really, what did the debt have to do with it in the first place? I'm not sure I'm following their point, Adam.
I'm not sure either.
I'm losing faith.
That's right. This is working in reverse.
Stop. Just believe, Adam. Just believe. That slide's boring. Each person is responsible for filing a tax return, Adam. It's called voluntary compliance. Because if you didn't comply, it wouldn't be voluntarily paying your taxes.
That phrase bothers me so much, I cannot even tell you. The fact that that this system, which obviously is enforced at the point of a gun, is called voluntary compliance.
Compliance.
It gives me a heartburn every single April. Who can I sue about this?
Well, obviously, having a little fun at the expense of our friends there. I'm sure an audit is coming our way very soon. But Adam, that phrase, voluntary compliance, that is just Orwellian, it's the definition of Orwellian newspeak. And it reminds me of an article that you wrote. I thought it'd be good to us to regurgitate here a bit. So why don't you tell us about that one?
Yeah, thanks. I just took my Substack as an opportunity to rant against the income tax, and that helpful re-education slideshow didn't take, so I'm just going to read it for you. It's short. Quote, "Once a year around this time, I give myself permission to go on a rant about the income tax. I hope you will indulge me. It's cathartic. This country existed and was quite prosperous prior to the passage of the 16th Amendment in 1913. There was no honorable reason to enact this hideous thing and foist it on a formerly free people. The income tax is truly evil. Think about what it actually is. The income tax decrees that the act of earning money is a crime. If the authorities catch you committing this crime, the penalty is a fee. The amount of that fee is a certain percentage of the amount you earned. The crooks can vote to raise the fee anytime they want. Worse, in violation of the Fifth Amendment, we are extorted each year under threat of further fees, interest charges, and jail time to testify against ourselves as to the commission and severity of this, quote, crime. To add insult to injury, the jackals have the gall to call this system one of, quote, voluntary compliance. The income tax is a hideous sin and a national disgrace. This is no way to treat a supposedly free people." And then I give a bunch of quotes. Famous people who hate the income tax as much as I do, but that's not that important.
My favorite quote is, or maybe not quote, your suggested IRS motto at the end of it. I won't spoil what you write there. It's pretty funny. So folks, if you want to see what that is, you should go over to HamanNature.com, our Substack, and find Adam's article titled "The Income Tax is an Abomination Before God and Reason," and I'm going to tell you why, from March 12th, 2025. So check that one out for yourself. Now, Adam, there's another article. When you're, I can't remember exactly what the saying is, but when you're an idiot like me, it's best to lean on people who are far smarter than you. And when it comes to all things economics, I always head on over to the Mises Institute because I'm sure I can find an article or something they've written or a podcast they've done or a lecture, classroom lecture they've given on any topic under the sun regarding economics. And sure enough, they got a couple articles on the income tax. But I found one that I think is just a really great overview. And I think I want to direct people there, and I'll read parts of that from here, just because I think the income tax comes around once a year, so it's kind of like when big elections come around, people are focused on it, so it's a good time, an opportunity to try to do some education or enlightenment from our perspective. So, folks, we'll of course have a link to this, but this can be found on the Mises Institute, Mises.org. It's an article from a couple of years ago, written on April 15th, tax day 2023, by Mark Branley. It's titled "The Income Tax: Lessons from the 16th Amendment." And Adam, what I'd like to do is read through sections of this, and then get some running commentary in mind. Now, just like our great enlightened philosophers at the IRS taught us that everything started with the revolution. I'm happy to see that the Mises article also begins from that point. At the founding of our country, the framers of our Constitution wisely withheld the right to tax incomes from the federal government. With the recent Revolutionary War in mind, the states were reluctant to cede strong taxing powers to a central state. That's interesting. It's a little bit of a different view.
Yeah, they left that off the slide that we just went through.
American Revolution caused debt. Need
ABC.
taxes to pay debt.
ABC.
You stupid caveman, don't you understand? Debt bad, unless it's the government borrowing it. Given the enormous change in how this country regards the income tax, it is instructive to consider its origins. All right. So the founding. The Constitution originally limited the federal government's power to tax. Article 1, Section 2. Hey, what do you know? Same as the IRS told us. Stated that direct taxes shall be uniform among the states. And that's really the crux here. Direct taxes were generally considered to be taxes such as head taxes or taxes on property, and uniform taxes had to be apportioned equally between the states according to population. So Article 1, Section 8 then gives Congress the power to tax duties, imposts, and excises, but reiterates the requirement for uniform taxation. So it's interesting. The crux of this is really the uniform taxation piece of it. The uniformity requirement was intended to restrict one region from imposing taxes on another region. The concepts of direct taxes and uniform later became crucially important in determining the constitutionality of income taxation. So again, a little bit more history. The anti-tax move of the country at that time is illustrated by the fact that direct excise taxes on spirits distilled from grain and on housing led to the Whiskey Rebellion in 1794 and the Fries Rebellion in 1798, respectively. And this is, I hate to break people's brains, but when George Washington put down the Whiskey Rebellion, I think he committed an act of treason and should have at minimum been impeached as president. What say you, Adam?
I completely agree, obviously. It is, I mean, this is an obvious point, but it just anytime you give the government power to take stuff, remember, the government's not an angel. It's just human beings like you and I. And that power will corrupt and they will start wanting to take stuff. I mean, look at the year, 1794. And they're just deciding to tax whiskey for I'm sure there's partly puritanical reasons and partly greed and just the impulse to exert force over your fellow man if you can, if you have the cultural and legal ability to do so. People just abuse it, and we should just always keep that in mind when we give our government power.
Yeah. Before we continue on with this article, Adam, I want to ask you one question. What's the most beautiful word in the English language?
Tariffs.
Tariffs.
Listen to the word. It rolls off the tongue.
All right.
Tariffs.
All right. So the Mises article goes on with a little bit more history. The country initially relied on tariff revenue to fund the government, but it didn't take long. It was less than a quarter of a century after the ratification of the Constitution to hear the first call for an income tax. The War of 1812 led to taxes on housing, land, and slaves. Revenue needs led to Alexander Dallas, Secretary of the Treasury, indicating that an income tax might generate a revenue of $3 million. The Treaty of Ghent ended the war and brought relief from the war taxes and eliminated any effort to impose an income tax. The tariff again became the primary source of revenue. The tariff was an economic weapon that the industrialized North could use against the rural areas of the country. Northern business interests, in conjunction with their minions in government, were victimizing the rural South with tariff. High tariff rates protected the northern manufacturing interests, and the South and West were paying a disproportionate share of this cost, with high prices for imports and for finished goods from the North. This exploitation was an impetus for the war when the South seceded from the Union. Now, wait a second, Adam. That's not what I learned in school.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to detour too terribly from an episode about taxes to talk about the causes of the quote Civil War, but yeah, I mean, it is well understood that halfway through it, the goalpost changed to make it about ending slavery. At the beginning of it, the North or pieces of it might have detested slavery in the South, but this was about tariffs and a bunch of other things the North was doing to the South to make them not want to be part of this union anymore. And it's just, I mean, it's goofy that we treat our citizenry as little children and give them this comic book version of the causes of the war. But it's even worse to romanticize Lincoln ending by force the concept that people can leave a union once they've entered into it if it becomes abusive. I mean, we don't allow it. The analogy of a married couple, when one spouse is battering the other and you're not allowed to leave. It's really gross when parties are allowed to abuse each other, and because you're in a relationship, you're not allowed to flee. We should rethink that, especially right now.
Yeah, I don't know, Adam. I joined my local gym, and I'm not allowed to cancel my membership there, because once I joined, it said in the fine print, "You're here forever."
Or until you lift enough weights that you can beat the final boss, and then you can end your gym membership.
You're not allowed to secede from your gym membership, Adam. Don't even try it. This is a little bit interesting. The article continues. The war between the states brought the next proposal for an income tax. So what I think some people think, there must have just always been an income tax. There's probably people think like death and taxes, right? Well, there's must have always been an income tax. I mean, how else? But I think a lot of people, even if they know that the income tax didn't come till the early 20th century, maybe didn't realize that there was a history of this the politicians trying to enact it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
That even from the beginning. Anyway, as Abraham Lincoln took office in 1861, he faced a federal debt of a whopping $75 million.
Isn't that quaint? 75 million?
I know. I wonder that's today's inflation adjusted. But anyway, tariffs were doubled, excise taxes were raised, and bonds were issued. In addition, An income tax act was passed in 1861 as a substitute for a direct tax on land, which was objectionable to political interests in the West and Southwest. The act decreed a tax rate of 3% on annual incomes over $800 and contained the first loophole. A reduced rate of 1.5% was placed on the interest of government bonds in order to facilitate the sale of bonds. Before this act was put into effect, the second bill was passed in 1862. Union debt had increased to over $500 million. Wow. That's quite 75 million in 1861 to over 500 million in 1862. Wow.
Right.
Holy smokes. Yeah, war makes debt.
Yeah, as we learned in the 3 bullet points.
War and COVID make debt. It's printing money.
It's gross no matter what, because war is gross and taxation is gross. But you have to wonder. The world's pretty crooked now, and it's famously crooked back then. You have to wonder how much of this money just got pilfered away by the various crony interests, or suppliers for the military, fictitious soldiers. I got to imagine they were fake platoons that were just getting all this money. Or maybe I'm just a cynical man. I don't
know. Yeah, it's just so funny to read some of these numbers, though, right? But 500 million, that's kind of a big number.
Big
even
increase.
In today's day and age. In 1862, that was our debt. Holy smokes. The new act had a progressive tax beginning with 3% rate on incomes of $600. Wow,
Right.
can you imagine an annual income of $600? Wow. And a top rate of 7.5% on incomes over $50,000. An 1864 act further increased tax rates. It's important to note that the progressivity of the tax was due to revenue needs and did not address any fairness concerns. That's all you hear today. Pay your fair share, right? But it wasn't about that then. The progressivity of the original income tax was just about how to best bring in as much revenue. After much debate, the income tax was scrapped in 1872. So it lasted 12 years or so. But interestingly, the constitutionality of the income tax during the Civil War was never tested in court. Many agreed that allowing the tax in wartime was a necessity that could not be tolerated in peacetime. Okay, blah, 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 whatever. But never tested in court. They just did it. And I don't know. They just did it. But the article goes on. Again, we're kind of still going through the history here, the rise of populism. Okay, but then things started to switch in 1894 when a new income tax law came about. The Democrats ran Grover Cleveland for president in 1892, and they actually had an anti-tariff platform, which is interesting. It was that platform was noted for its denunciation of Republican protection as a fraud, a robbery of the great majority of the American people for the benefit of a few. I think the Democrats maybe could pull this line from history. That sounds like a good talking point. It also termed the McKinley tariff the culminating atrocity of class legislation. Whoa. All right. So we got some anti-tariff folks. Cleveland himself called the tariff ruthless extortion. Cleveland easily beat Harrison in this race. A small but growing deficit made it difficult for Cleveland to meet his pledge for tariff reduction. Surprise, surprise. An income tax seemed to be a means of reducing tariffs while balancing the budget, and he called for a small tax upon incomes in December of 1893. Opponents called a peacetime income tax socialistic and warned that the Supreme Court would declare such a tax unconstitutional. The House version of the 1894 Wilson-Gorman tariff bill eliminated the McKinley tariffs and instituted an income tax of 2% on incomes above $4,000. 98% of the populace was completely exempt from this tax. The act passed easily, and the tax proponents jubilantly carried away the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, William Wilson, out of the hall on their shoulders.
Can you imagine?
Can you imagine? Oh my gosh. You know, it's funny. People see like the stuff that happens in Congress today, and people screaming at each other and getting in fights, and thinks, wow, that's just so not what's the word I'm looking for? A demeanor bent
right
of a politician, and like it's so crass. But if you go back in time and read some of this stuff, man, dudes got in fist fights in Congress. Like there was one guy that like had a cane and like clubbed somebody almost to death. Like Congress people arguing with each other. Things weren't as civil as we like to romantically think of them. These very educated and smart guys,
Yeah, the distinguished gentleman
Yes,
from
the distinguished
Kentucky.
gentleman. Let my fist meet your distinguished face.
And even in this day and age, you just go across the ocean, find some legislatures where people are taking machetes to one another.
Yeah. When the Senate debated the issue, however, tariff rates were increased.
Yeah, how about that?
Government never saw a tax they didn't like.
Yep.
Cleveland had been betrayed by protectionist forces within his own party. If he vetoed the bill, McKinley tariff would continue, and he would contradict himself by signing it. Cleveland refused to sign the bill, but allowed it to go into law without his signature. How the hell does that happen?
Yeah, that's not a thing, is it?
Man, you think things are corrupt now. I'm telling you, man, they play some dirty games. And you want to talk about rigging elections. How easy was it to rig elections back then? Who was counting the votes? Right? It was all on paper and whatever. It's like, talk about
only 5 people in the country knew how to count over 50.
Well, yeah, because they didn't have public education, Adam.
That's right. We hadn't invented numbers yet.
So this 1894 tax was immediately challenged in court, and the Supreme Court took up the issue in Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust Company. The court declared the tax unconstitutional. So finally, here we get the first Supreme Court coming in saying it was unconstitutional, but it wasn't overwhelming. It was only a vote of 5-4. So it's not like the Supreme Court was really, this is definitely unconstitutional. But it was found unconstitutional on the grounds that it was a direct tax, not assessed uniformly. There's the uniform part. That's really the key constitutional hinge. Tax proponents argued that the original intent of the constitutional writers was for direct taxes to be considered taxes on property, not on income. The majority opinion, however, viewed the income tax as a direct tax. All right. So you and I, as libertarians, are quite familiar with this. We at least acknowledge that when they finally did decide to amend the Constitution, they at least had the honesty and integrity to amend the Constitution, right? Like, okay, it's unconstitutional, fine, let's make it constitutional. Now, today, like if we just want to bomb some children in a foreign country, we don't need to declare war or follow the Constitution. We just do it, right? And supposedly we're going through a constitutional crisis right now because of what Donald Trump is doing. But it's completely okay for the government just to shut down all businesses for a while and print trillions of dollars. That's not a constitutional crisis. I don't know, Adam. You have any thoughts here?
Yeah, I want to pause for just a minute to talk about what those 4 justices who voted that the tax was constitutional, just to reflect on the fact that laws written on pieces of paper can't save you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure those four had a completely rational argument, and it probably went something like this. Yes, I know the Constitution is very clear that you cannot have direct taxes that are not assessed uniformly. And it sure looks like it's being assessed not uniformly when some people are exempt and other people are being taxed at this rate. But hey, it's the same law applied to every person the same. They didn't have to make money. They chose to make money. We are applying this tax uniformly, and it's just their particular behavior. They could have just slept all year and not made a nickel. And it just goes to show that the people who wrote the Constitution obviously weren't thinking that way. They thought this law was very clear and very direct, but you can weasel your way into making any kind of lawyerly argument to justify the way you want to rule.
That's right.
And it means don't put your faith in laws to protect you or regulations to protect you, because we can always think our way around them by constructing some reason why this thing doesn't apply the way the plain language of the law makes it apply.
And I think Stephen Kinsella makes a great point about this. He said it many times and written about it. The difference between, I'm going to botch this, but I'll call it legislative law, creating laws from, say, a government entity top down, versus civil law that is born from the ground up, from cases that come about through the community. And when you have an elected group of folks who can just make laws out of thin air, right, and then enforce it from the top down, you're going to get, like you said, weaselly lawyers coming up with any sort of rationalistic justification and twist the meaning of words or change definitions or come up with any sort of argument, versus it coming from the people ground up through real cases that happen day-to-day life.
That's a great point. The fragility that I just described is much more pronounced in legislation versus common law or civil law. And it's because of that, rather than just one sentence written on a piece of paper that you get to interpret. Instead, you have dozens or hundreds of cases.
Right.
And the meaning of the law as applied to those cases makes it much more robust and contextual,
right,
and safe from lying and confusion by some judge who just wants to arbitrarily decide that all of a sudden this principle that was borne out through hundreds of cases now means something different. It's much harder to do that when you have something robust and real as a civil law or a common law.
All right, so now the article will skip ahead a little bit and get to how they talk about our favorite amendment to the Constitution. Remember, hooray for tax day. We wouldn't be able to celebrate this, Adam, if it wasn't for the 16th Amendment. So
Yay?
Let's, put on our party hats and, well, I don't know. The Mises Institute seems to have a different view of this, because they begin this section by saying, unfortunately,
what?
The Republicans regained the White House in 1896. The call for income taxes waned as the progressive reformers of the era turned to other matters, particularly the antitrust battle. There was still some support for an income tax, and in 1904, William Jennings Bryan was even able to get support for an income tax plank in the Democratic platform. Republican President Theodore Roosevelt revived the idea in a speech on the 4th of July. He stated that taxation may be desirable for limiting large fortunes, and according to an account of the time, declared vehemently for a graduated income tax. Democrats were jubilant. Smiles froze on the faces of Republicans. Although no other prominent Republican showed much interest, the debate was renewed. Yeah, that great... Those great Republican upholders, defenders of the Constitution, Abraham Lincoln and Theodore Roosevelt, the heroes of American history. I mean, they've got their faces carved in stone, Adam.
Is this part of the propaganda slide again?
In 1909, William Howard Taft, a Republican, but arguably the least likely candidate to approve of an income tax, succeeded Roosevelt as president. It seemed unlikely that a tax revolution was at hand. Taft took office in the middle of a tariff battle Tariff bill. Where have I heard that before?
Hmm.
And a revenue shortfall. His own party was split on the tax tariff issue. The Democrats were pushing for an income tax bill, expecting the court to reverse itself on the issue. To placate both sides, Taft proposed a corporation excise tax, actually an income tax under another name, of 1% of net incomes in excess of $5,000. The revenue from the excise would relieve the revenue problem and diffuse the tariff debate in his own party. The Supreme Court later approved the excise tax, indicating that it may have sanctioned a tax on personal incomes. To quiet the Democrats, Taft proposed an amendment authorizing Congress to collect income taxes. The amendment would relieve Congress of following the uniformity clause regarding direct taxation. He believed that this was a harmless gesture and that the amendment would never succeed. A leading proponent for the income tax, Robert La Follette, dang French, dirty French, agreed that the success of this amendment is improbable. As Americans, Adam, we're all still unified against the French, right?
Yes,
I can
unquestionably.
make that joke without being canceled.
Always.
Okay. The Senate passed the amendment unanimously. The House was 318 for, 14 against, 55 abstentions. The strength of the tax movement in the states was highly underestimated by parties on both sides of the debate. The amendment went to the states in 1909. Alabama ratified it unanimously. 8 others followed in 1910. And the required 36 states ratified the amendment by 1913. On February 25th, 1913, the 16th Amendment was adopted. Woo! Democrats held the presidency since Woodrow Wilson had been elected in 1912 and controlled both houses of Congress. The debate over an income tax bill began immediately, and the 1913 Revenue Act was passed on October 3rd of that year. It specified a 1% tax rate with a $3,000 personal exemption, a progressive surtax ranging from 1% to 6%, resulting in a top rate of 7%. The tax was retroactive to the day that the amendment was ratified.
Wow.
Tariff reductions were also in the bill. In fact, the debate in Congress centered around the tariff issues. By 1916, World War I had reduced trade, thereby reducing tariff revenue, and business profits were down, which decreased corporate tax revenue. This, coupled with increased spending for war preparation, created a deficit, and the income tax was called upon to relieve it. All right, so very low rates, but it didn't take long. By 1917, due to increased revenue needs, a new act was passed, increasing the top rate to 67%.
Isn't that amazing? How fast the rate went up so high?
Shocking. As soon as they get their hands on a new funding source, woof, they go crazy. Plus, they can just go to war. The Revenue Act of 1918 again increased tax rates. The lowest rate was up to 6%, and the highest rate to 77%.
That's 5 years from 1913. What was the top rate in 1913? What'd you say, 6%?
7%, 7 or 7.5%, something like that.
Crazy.
Yeah. And the article itself says, in just 5 years, a tax that was promised to be a small tax on the rich became a substantial tax applying to a broad base. All right, and then finally, Adam, this Mises article concludes with a few lessons. First lesson being the framers of the Constitution specifically limited the taxation powers that they accorded Congress. They argued that Congress was ill-equipped to restrain itself. Given the powers of the 16th Amendment, Congress established tax rates formerly considered beyond reasonable bounds. This should be a warning when Congress promises to restrain itself in other matters, such as any promises regarding taxes, spending in the current budget debate. Second, one danger of replacing one tax with another is that it is no longer necessary to rely on the initial tax to generate revenue. Implementing the income tax reduced the need for tariff receipts. This freed up the tariff to be used for protectionist measures with little need to consider the revenue consequences. So no longer a revenue tool, it's now a political tool. Recent tariff debates center on free trade versus protection arguments and have little to do with the tax revenue consequences. Isn't that true? Giving the government multiple tax means allows it to use some tax methods for punitive ends. And then finally, they say, third, the income tax movement was driven by the motive to shift the tax burden from one group, the southern and western states, to another, the northern industrial states. Those believing that they would escape income taxation anticipated incorrectly. Tax burden shifting is a dangerous scheme that could, and in this instance, did backfire. All right, so interesting article celebrating Tax Day and the 16th Amendment. Love it. I am feeling so good about the check I'm about to write in support of civilization. I'm so happy. Adam, what are your final thoughts? I'm assuming you're experiencing a jubilation.
Yeah, I guess I don't know what that word means, jubilation. I'm feeling indigestion, anger, rage. No, it's a great article. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for indulging us as we, sort of slog through it. But they've got some great points in there, especially at the end. You cannot trust a politician to swap out one, quote, revenue generation scheme, with another. And once you give them that power or normalize it or just expect it to be used against you. Look how fast the interest rates rise from 1913 when this thing was ratified. 5 years later, it whatever it is, 10x. Keep that in mind. Don't trust these people. And if you can't control government spending, it doesn't really matter about the means that they generate the money from. Counterfeiting is, a tax on everybody, and income taxes and tariffs can be used politically to manipulate behavior in horrible ways. The income tax is an abomination. I stand by my article, and please go read it if you like. Go to hamannature.com or directly hamannature.substack.com and check that article out. And leave comments for us if you disagree or if you agree vociferously. Love to hear from you. Comments are also open on the YouTube channel at Haman Nature. And unless you have anything else, Tyrone, I'm going to bid these people adieu.
All right, let's go celebrate.
Woo! We'll catch you next time on Haman Nature. Thanks, everybody.